frankly, one of the toughest challenges when you're learning English.
You mean that internal process? The one where you have a thought, but instead of it just popping out in English, it takes that long, frustrating detour through your native language first.
Exactly. That moment where your brain basically becomes this complex translation engine, slowing everything down, making communication feel clunky.
Yeah, that internal translation machine that adds friction to every single conversation.
So the core topic we're diving into today is how to move beyond that.
Yeah.
How to build a direct, effortless pathway so your thoughts can simply be formed in English right from the start.
It feels like a monumental task, doesn't it? Like something only certain people can do naturally. But what's truly fascinating is how the sources we've pulled from for this deep dive frame it.
Oh, so?
They present it not as some innate gift, but as a skill, a trainable skill, like, learning to play an instrument or building physical strength.
They actually use the analogy of a muscle, right?
Yeah.
That your brain can be specifically trained and strengthened for this kind of direct language processing.
Precisely. It's not about waiting for it to happen. It's about actively building it with practice.
And that's the mission for this deep dive. We've gone through these different sources, articles, research, practical guides to extract the absolute most important actionable nuggets of knowledge.
The practical steps you can genuinely start implementing right now to build that direct link between your thoughts and English.
And the payoff, according to the sources, is huge. It directly leads to greater fluency, effortless communication, and a much more natural, connected feeling to the language itself.
You're not constantly translating and processing, you're just thinking and speaking. Which, if you think about it, is exactly how you learned your first language.
Right. As the sources point out, a child doesn't learn by translating from another language. They learn by direct association.
Sound equals thing, word equals action, feeling equals expression.
Boom. Direct connection. That's what we're trying to recreate here in a conscious, deliberate way.
The sources aptly call that translation process the detour. It diverts your natural thought flow, native language, translation, English.
When the goal is that much simpler, more efficient path, thought English.
It takes effort, no doubt. Like any training, it requires commitment. But the material is incredibly encouraging about the potential.
Yeah, feeling that shift, that moment when a thought just is in English, that's got to be incredibly rewarding.
It really is.
Okay, so if you're ready to start bypassing the detour and building that direct highway in your brain, where do these sources suggest you begin? They say the absolute simplest first step is almost deceptively easy.
It really is. It starts with just naming objects silently.
Naming objects. That sounds almost too basic to be effective. How does that actually train my brain to think in English?
Well, the key is the silence and the intent. Look around you right now, wherever you are. See a chair. Mentally think chair. See a phone. Mentally think phone. The sources stress this is about internal thought, not speaking aloud at this stage.
Okay. So the purpose is to get the English word to come forward in your mind first, without involving your native language at all.
Exactly. You see the object, and the English label is the immediate mental response.
You're building that direct visual word association.
Precisely. You're wiring your brain to connect the image of the object directly to the English word for it. Every object you mentally label throughout your day is a tiny repetition, a low-level reinforcement.
So you do this consistently, like walking down the street, sitting somewhere.
Your walk to work, sitting in a cafe, looking around your living room. Every object is an opportunity for a mini mental English drill. It just becomes a background habit.
Okay, so it's about building that foundational layer of direct association for concrete things. What's the next step up from there?
From static objects to dynamic actions. The sources highlight describing simple actions internally as you perform them throughout your day.
Connecting language to movement and activity.
Right.
Makes sense.
Exactly. As you go about your daily routine, mentally narrate what you're doing using simple English phrases. The material gives examples like, I am walking.
I am opening the door.
I am brushing my teeth. I am boiling water. Things like that.
Or, as you mentioned, your morning routine is a perfect place to start this. It's usually the same sequence of actions every day, right?
Absolutely. It's predictable. So waking up, you think, I wake up, I open my eyes, I stretch.
I sit up, I get out of bed, I walk to the kitchen.
I make coffee, I pour the water. Connecting the English phrase directly to the physical movement helps wire that association deep into your brain.
So it starts making English the natural language for processing your own physical experience.
That's the idea.
Okay, so we're training our brain to link English directly to the external world, objects, and actions. But what about the internal world? The constant stream of thoughts, ideas, plans, worries, that inner dialogue that's almost certainly happening in your native language right now.
Ah, yes. This is where the sources say the real magic happens, and maybe where it can feel a bit more challenging initially. You're right, that inner voice is a deeply ingrained habit.
So how do you persuade that inner voice to start speaking English instead? That sounds tricky.
It requires active, conscious training. The sources suggest starting small and treating it like a quiet, internal conversation with yourself.
Like asking yourself simple questions in English.
Exactly. When you have a moment of quiet, internally ask yourself things you'd normally think about anyway. What should I have for lunch today?
And then answer yourself in English. Maybe I'll have a salad. Or I can make soup.
Or thinking about your plans for the day. What do I need to do this afternoon?
Okay, I need to send that email first. Then call the bank.
These internal Q&As are like mini workouts for your inner English voice. You're practicing formulating complete, albeit simple, thoughts directly in English. It starts building fluency not just in speaking, but in thinking.
That makes a lot of sense. Start with small, simple internal conversations. Then the sources suggest dedicating specific blocks of time just for this, right?
Yes, this is the structured thinking time technique. It's about consciously setting aside a period each day, maybe starting with just 10 or 15 minutes with one specific goal.
And that goal is to consciously try to frame all thoughts during that thoughting. Plans, observations, feelings, whatever pops into your head in English.
That's the intention. You're deliberately telling your brain, okay, for the next 15 minutes, we're operating in English. You consciously redirect your thinking into English for that focused period.
But I can already hear listeners thinking, I'm going to slip back into my native language constantly. It's going to feel impossible. That's what I'd be thinking.
And you absolutely will. The sources are incredibly realistic and, kind about this. This isn't about instant perfection. Slipping back is not a failure.
Okay, that's reassuring.
The training is actually in the noticing and the redirecting. You simply notice, okay, I switched back, and then calmly, gently redirect your focus. Let me try to think that in English again.
So it's about building awareness and the habit of returning to English, not about somehow never leaving it in the first place.
Exactly. It's like catching yourself drifting and just guiding your thoughts back onto the English path.
And then you gradually increase the time allocated.
That's right. As 15 minutes gets easier, maybe you push to 20, then 30. The long-term goal is for English to become the default language for more and more of your internal processing. But as the sources emphasize, this is definitely a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely. And to build this internal world, you obviously need the vocabulary. But it's not just about memorizing lists, is it? The sources stress something else.
That's a key point. Vocabulary is crucial, it's the building material, but its real value is in active use, not just passive knowledge stored away somewhere.
You need to be able to pull it out spontaneously in your thoughts.
Right, so when you learn a new word, the sources suggest immediately trying to use it in sentences in your mind. Don't just learn the translation, learn how it feels and sounds in a sentence.
So if you learn the word exhilarating,
Don't just think exhilarating your native word. Think that roller coaster ride was exhilarating. Or maybe learning a new skill can feel exhilarating.
and mentally repeat that sentence or phrase a few times.
Yes. Connect the word to the feeling, the context, the mental image. That's how you internalize it, making it part of your active thinking vocabulary, ready to be accessed spontaneously when you need it.
Okay. The sources also find value in organizing vocabulary practice by categories, right? How does that help with thinking directly?
It kind of mirrors how our brains often store and retrieve information in related groups or networks. Think about kitchen items,
Yeah.
spoon, fork, knife, plate, bowl, cup, mug.
Right, they all belong together.
So if you learn these together, you can then mentally list them. Spoon, fork, knife, and then take the next step. Make simple sentences using them in your head. I need a clean spoon. Where's my favorite mug?
Or clothing,
Hmm.
shirt, pants, socks, jacket, hat. Mentally list them, then think, I need to buy new socks. It's cold. I should wear a jacket.
It helps create a mental network of related words, making them much more accessible when you need them in a spontaneous thought or description. You're essentially building mini databases in English that are easy to access quickly.
Okay, so we're building the foundation with objects, actions, inner chat, structured time, and this active vocabulary practice. What about processing English that's coming at you, like when you're watching a video or listening to something like this?
Ah, yeah. The sources highlight this as a critical opportunity for internal practice. The mistake many learners make is just consuming passively, sort of hoping it sinks in by osmosis.
Which doesn't really work that well.
Not for this kind of active thinking skill. The key is active processing.
And the central technique they suggest for this is to pause occasionally and actively summarize what you just heard or watched.
In English, in your own words, internally. This forces your brain to actually process and then reformulate the information using English.
So if I'm watching, say, a documentary, I might pause it every few minutes and mentally think, okay, the speaker just explained the history of this issue. They said it started back in year because of reason, sort of narrating the key points to myself.
Exactly. You're taking the English input, analyzing it, and producing your own English output, even if it's only internal. You're actively working with the language at a much deeper level than just basic comprehension.
Reading is another massive source of input, obviously. Books, articles, online content.
Incredibly powerful for this. The core advice here is to read for meaning and try to immerse yourself in the story or the information. Visualize what's happening. Don't try to translate word for word in your head.
And crucially, if you encounter a word you don't know, the sources are very clear. Resist that immediate urge to grab a dictionary or translator.
Yes. Try to guess the meaning first from the surrounding words, from the context. What kind of word would make sense here?
Why is that so important?
Because every time you stop to translate a single word, you break the flow of English thinking. You switch your brain out of English mode and back into translation mode. Guessing from context keeps your brain operating continuously in English.
Keeps the English engine running smoothly.
I got it.
The sources also connect reading or observation to a practical visualization technique.
Oh, the guided visualization exercise. It's really great for solidifying those direct links we talked about. If you're somewhere quiet now, you can even try it briefly with us. Maybe close your eyes for just a moment.
Okay, eyes closed. I'm ready.
All right. Imagine yourself walking into a familiar space, maybe your kitchen, your bedroom, a favorite park. Now, mentally, using only English, start naming the objects you see in your mind's eye.
Okay, there's a table, chairs, a window, a plant.
Good. Now add simple descriptions or actions, just quick ones.
The table is made of wood. The chairs are blue. The sun is coming through the window. I walk towards the plant.
Perfect. This kind of mental walkthrough, visually placing yourself in a space and immediately labeling and describing it in English, builds really strong, direct associations. You're training your brain to process your environment using English as the primary lens.
That feels very concrete and practical. It's not just abstract language floating around. It's tied directly to your reality. And it's not just the physical world either. The sources emphasize expressing your internal state too, right? Your feelings.
Absolutely vital. Fluency isn't only about describing the external world. It's about expressing your emotions, your feelings, your opinions. The sources encourage practicing putting these internal states into simple English words internally.
Like just thinking, I feel happy today, or I'm a bit tired.
That news made me angry. I'm excited about the weekend. Learning to identify and articulate your feelings directly in English is a huge step towards making the language feel truly yours, making it feel capable of expressing the whole range of your internal experience.
Okay, so we're building this internal English world step by step. How do we then bridge that internal practice to actually interacting with other people? The sources highlight simulating real-life interactions.
Yes, this is a really powerful technique mentioned across the material, mentally preparing for conversations by running through potential scenarios in your head beforehand.
Like the classic cafe example they often use.
Exactly. Before you go to a cafe or even just imagining it, mentally walk through the steps in English. Okay, I'm going into the cafe. I need to order. What do I want? A coffee. Okay, I'll ask for a large latte.
And then maybe rehearse the potential mini conversation in your head.
Right. Hello, can I have a large latte, please? Anticipate the response. To stay or to go? And think your answer. To go, please.
So you're anticipating the language needed for a specific situation?
Precisely. You can do this for countless scenarios. Shopping, asking for directions, meeting a friend, a job interview even. The more you mentally run through these interactions, rehearsing phrases and anticipating responses, the more readily that English becomes available in the actual moment.
It builds a kind of conversational muscle memory in your brain. It's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it really is.
And they suggest carrying this simulation into real interactions too, trying to stay in English mode internally.
Yes, aiming to keep your internal dialogue in English, not just before a conversation, but during it as well.
So as I'm listening to someone speak, I'm trying to process what they're saying and formulate my response in English in my head simultaneously without mentally translating.
That's the goal. You're trying to prevent that detour back to your native language. It's definitely challenging, especially at first, but the more you try, the faster your brain gets at thinking on its feet in English.
And importantly, the sources say to reflect after the conversation, using English internally again.
Yes, this is crucial for learning and improvement. Mentally replay the conversation. Ask yourself, how did that go? What did they say exactly? What did I say? What words did I struggle with? What could I have said better?
So you're using the real-life experience as an immediate training opportunity.
Exactly. You're immediately reinforcing what worked and identifying areas for improvement, all within the English framework you're trying to build.
Okay, we've covered internal thought, processing input, and simulating interaction. What about the bridge to actual speaking? The sources strongly recommend something called mirror talk.
Ah, yes, talking to yourself in the mirror. It might feel a little strange at first, I admit.
Yeah, maybe a bit awkward.
Perhaps. But the sources consistently say it's incredibly effective for bridging that gap between internal thought and external speech. Start really simple. Just say hello to yourself in the mirror.
Hi, how you doing today? Something like that. Yeah.
And then answer yourself. Talk about your day. Well, I had a busy morning. I finished that report I was working on. Now I'm feeling a bit tired. As you get more comfortable, you can talk about opinions, future plans, or describe something you see.
What's the main benefit of doing it in front of a mirror specifically?
It builds confidence speaking English aloud without the pressure of having a real listener judging you. You get comfortable hearing your own voice producing English sounds. You can also focus consciously on your pronunciation, your mouth movements, your intonation.
So it helps your brain and your mouth work together more directly.
Yes, taking the English thoughts you're cultivating and turning them into spoken words more smoothly, more naturally. It makes the physical act of speaking feel less foreign.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's talk about reinforcing all this practice. The sources have some really good techniques for solidifying the learning and making it stick. Daily reflection is one they mention.
Yes, ending your day by mentally reviewing what happened, but doing it specifically in English.
So just mentally walk through the day's main events. Woke up at 7, had breakfast, checked emails, went to a meeting at 10. It was interesting.
Ate lunch with friend's name. We talked about topic, came home, made dinner pasta again, read a book for an hour. Now I'm getting ready for bed.
You're linking your real-life experiences and memories directly to English description and sequencing.
It's powerful reinforcement. You're applying the language to your actual life.
Journaling is a related technique mentioned, but obviously in written form.
Absolutely. Writing down your thoughts, feelings, daily events in English. And crucially, just like with internal thinking, the sources say don't let grammar paralysis stop you initially.
Just get the thoughts out onto the page.
Yes. The primary goal here is training your thoughts to flow in English. Put them down on paper or on screen, even if it's just simple sentences at first. Feeling good today, sunny outside, need coffee.
How does writing help differently than just thinking it internally?
Well, it forces a slightly slower, more deliberate process than just internal thought. You see the English words visually, which provides reinforcement. And being able to look back over time and see your progress, seeing your thoughts actually taking shape on the page in English can be incredibly motivating.
That's true. Seeing progress written down is powerful.
What about recalling past events, like telling stories to yourself?
Another excellent technique the sources mention for building narrative fluency. Pick a memory, maybe a vacation, a birthday party, a memorable day at work, and try to recount it internally, or maybe write it in your journal in English.
Like describing a past trip. Okay, last summer I went to the beach with my family. We drove for about 3 hours. The weather was perfect, really warm and sunny. We built sand castles and swam in the ocean. I remember feeling very happy and relaxed.
Exactly. You're practicing describing scenes, sequencing events, using past tenses, connecting feelings to experiences, all within the English framework. It helps your brain build the structures needed to tell a coherent story or recount an experience directly in English without translating first. Okay, switching gears slightly, the sources suggest some more active, almost game-like techniques to keep practice engaging and maybe less like homework.
Yes, making it feel less like work and more like play is always good for motivation. The category game is a simple, fun one they mention.
How does that work exactly?
You just pick a category, anything animals, food, furniture, emotions, jobs. Then mentally or even quickly jotting them down, list as many items in that category as you can think of in English.
Okay, animals. Dog, cat, bird, fish, elephant, lion, tiger.
Right. Then you can take it a step further and make quick, simple sentences about a few of them in your head. The dog is barking. I saw a small bird in the tree.
Or food. Apple, banana, bread, cheese, pasta, rice. Think. I ate an apple for a snack. I really love cheese.
It's all about rapid recall of vocabulary and immediate, simple application. It connects the word to its meaning and basic usage very quickly. It's a great mental agility drill for your English brain.
Music is another rich area mentioned. If you enjoy listening to English songs, don't just listen passively.
Right. Pay attention to the lyrics and then try to understand the meaning. The sources suggest taking a line or maybe a verse and mentally explaining what you think it means in your own words in English.
So if a song has a line about feeling lost, you might think internally, okay, this line probably means the singer feels confused, maybe uncertain about their direction in life, and doesn't know what to do next.
Exactly. You're processing the metaphorical language, the emotional content, the deeper message, not just the surface words. It helps you connect with English on an emotional and interpretive level, which is really key to making it feel like a language for expressing complex thoughts and feelings, not just basic facts.
Then there's shadowing, which the sources often call particularly powerful for improving speaking fluency and pronunciation.
It really is. The idea is you listen to a short piece of spoken English, maybe a sentence from a podcast like this, a line from a movie, a phrase from a song. Then you immediately repeat it aloud, trying to mimic the speaker's pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation as closely as possible.
So you're almost speaking along with them or right after them.
Or pausing and repeating right after you hear it. Hear someone say, "What are you doing?" and immediately repeat, "What are you doing?" Focusing on sounding like the original speaker. Then maybe try saying it again from memory.
What's the core benefit here specifically for thinking in English beyond just pronunciation?
It trains your brain and your mouth to work together seamlessly to produce natural-sounding English quickly. It helps you move from the thought of saying something to the physical act of saying it with the correct rhythm and flow, bypassing some of that hesitation. It strengthens the bridge between your internal English thinking and your external English speech.
Okay, let's address a very common, often frustrating challenge. What happens when you're trying to think or maybe speak in English, perhaps describing something, and you completely blank on a specific word? You know what you want to say conceptually, but the English word just isn't there.
Oh, it happens to everyone, even native speakers sometimes. The crucial advice from the sources here is do not immediately give up and switch back to your native language to find that word or look it up.
Right, because that breaks the English flow we're trying to build. So what do you do instead?
Circumlocution. That's the key technique. Try to describe the word or concept using other English words that you do know. Talk around it.
Like the classic example of forgetting the word scissors, you'd think, or say, it's a tool. You use it to cut paper or fabric. It has two blades and handles you put your fingers in.
Exactly. You talk around the word. This keeps your thought process entirely in English. You don't break the immersion. Plus, it actually trains your brain to stay in the English zone and find creative ways to express yourself even when your vocabulary feels limited in the moment. It's a really valuable communication skill in itself, not just a workaround.
Keep that English engine running. Find another route. That makes sense. Another real-time practice they suggest is actively describing the scenes around you.
Yes, this is great for sharpening your observation skills and practicing descriptive language on the fly. If you're sitting on a bus, waiting in a queue in a park, or even just looking around your room, start mentally describing what you see.
Start simple again, maybe. There's a tree. Then add detail. The tree is tall. It has green leaves. Some leaves are turning yellow.
There are people walking by. Some are carrying bags. A man is walking a dog. The sky is cloudy today. Just constantly observing and mentally labeling and describing your environment in English trains your brain to process the world directly through the language. It makes you quicker at accessing descriptive vocabulary when you need it.
And to keep all this practice fresh and prevent boredom, which is a real risk, the sources suggest introducing daily thinking challenges.
Yes, giving yourself a small, specific task for your English thinking time each day. It adds variety and focuses your effort, stops it feeling too random.
Like, okay, today, my challenge is to describe my living room in as much detail as possible in English, just in my head.
Or, today, I will mentally summarize the plot of the last book I read in English. Or maybe, explain the steps for how to make my favorite dish.
It works different mental muscles each time. Prevents it from becoming monotonous, like doing the same exercise every day.
Exactly. And they also talk about using those little pockets of in-between moments, that downtime we all have, for casual English thoughts.
Those times when your brain isn't intensely focused on something else, like when you're washing dishes, waiting in line at the store, commuting.
Instead of just letting your mind drift automatically in your native language, gently guide it towards English. Just simple, low-pressure thoughts, nothing strenuous.
I wonder if the store has that brand of coffee today. The weather looks nice. Maybe I'll go for a walk later this afternoon. What should I watch on TV tonight?
Just letting your casual musings happen in English. It keeps the language active in your mind throughout the day without feeling like a dedicated, effortful chore.
Non-negotiable is simply listen, listen, listen.
Just massive amounts of input.
Yes. Constant, regular exposure to native speakers talking is the bedrock. You absolutely have to make it a habit, ideally a daily one.
So podcasts, YouTube videos, music, movies, TV shows, just immerse yourself in native media.
Pretty much. It's almost impossible to develop strong listening comprehension without putting in the hours. You train your ear by using it consistently.
Okay, volume of input is key. What's another core strategy?
Pick a reference variation of English and focus on that one, at least initially.
So choose either, say, standard American English or standard British English, like received pronunciation, to start with.
That's the idea. The source shares a personal anecdote about how the speaker, being Brazilian, was heavily influenced by standard American English because that was the majority of the media they consumed growing up. That became their reference point.
So by focusing on one standard variety first, you give your brain a consistent model to learn from.
Exactly. It provides a solid anchor. Once you feel pretty comfortable understanding that main accent, say, you can watch American movies without too much trouble. Then you can start deliberately branching out.
To explore other accents like Australian, Irish, Scottish, etc.
Right. Trying to master every single accent right from the beginning can feel incredibly overwhelming and might actually slow down your progress on understanding the most common forms. Consistency with one reference accent first is a smart approach.
That makes sense. Build a strong foundation first. Okay, what else? There was a tip that sounded pretty intense.
Ah, yes. The suggestion to actively remove media in your native language for a specific period.
Right. The source suggested maybe 1 or even 2 years, where you listen only to English media.
Yeah, it's a strong recommendation, framed as a kind of near-total immersion.
That sounds like a huge commitment.
It is, but the source argues, based on experience, that this level of focused, intense immersion is often what it takes for your listening skills to truly consolidate, stabilize, and reach a significantly higher level.
So it's about creating an environment where your brain has to rely on English for auditory input.
Exactly. It forces adaptation. The source clarifies that after this dedicated period, you can absolutely go back to enjoying media in your own language, but for that stretch of time, that near obsession, as they put it, can be transformative for listening skills.
So setting a specific time frame and really committing to that English-only media diet.
Being very intentional about that immersion period, yes.
Okay. What's another key tip?
Consume a variety of media types. Don't just stick to one thing.
So don't just listen to podcasts or only watch sitcoms. Mix it up.
Yes. Listen to podcasts, watch YouTube channels on different topics, watch movies, binge TV series, listen to audiobooks, watch TED Talks, listen to news reports.
Why is that variety important?
Different formats expose you to different styles of speaking, different paces, different levels of formality, different conversational dynamics. A scripted movie sounds different from an unscripted interview podcast, which sounds different from a news anchor. This variety trains your ear more comprehensively.
Got it. And related to that, the source also recommends consuming a variety of topics.
Definitely. And crucially, focus on topics that you are genuinely interested in anyway.
Like, if you love movies, listen to film review podcasts. If you're into psychology, find lectures or interviews on that. Technology, music, history, whatever floats your boat.
Exactly. The source gives examples like movies, music, rock and roll, psychology, education, technology. When you're actually interested in the content, listening becomes much more engaging and sustainable. It feels less like a chore and more like pursuing your interests, just in English.
That's a great point for motivation. Okay, another practical strategy mentioned involves how you practice listening specifically, distinguishing between different listening goals.
Right. Practicing listening for gist versus listening for specific information.
Okay, explain those. Listening for gist.
Listening for gist means your only goal is to understand the main idea, the overall point, or the core message of a listening clip. Maybe you listen to something short, 2 to 5 minutes. Then you pause and just try to summarize, maybe out loud or by writing it down. What was the main point here?
So you're not worrying about catching every single word or detail, just the big picture.
Exactly. This is particularly useful for learners at lower levels or when you're encountering really challenging material. Getting bogged down trying to understand every single word can be counterproductive and frustrating. Focus on the main message first.
Okay, that's listening for gist. What about listening for specific information?
This is a different kind of listening practice. Here, your goal is to deliberately listen for and catch specific details mentioned in the audio. Things like names, numbers, dates, times, places, specific facts or figures.
So like listening to a news report and trying to catch the key statistics, or listening to directions and noting the street names and turns.
Precisely. It trains your ear to pick out those crucial details from the stream of speech.
And for more advanced learners, say B2 or C1 level and above, the source suggests an even more demanding type of listening practice.
Yes, listening for verbatim accuracy. This is where you try to transcribe, to write down every single word you hear exactly as it was spoken.
Wow, that sounds incredibly difficult. Why is that exercise so valuable?
The source argues it's essential for developing real precision and accuracy in your listening. It forces intense concentration. It makes you pay attention to every little sound, every connection, every reduction, every grammatical structure.
It must really highlight the gaps in your understanding.
It does. The course notes that many learners might think they understand the gist, maybe feeling like they got 90–95% of it. But if they actually tried to transcribe that same audio verbatim, they'd likely realize they missed a lot more nuances, small words, or specific phrasings than they thought. It shows the gap between general comprehension and truly accurate, detailed understanding.
So, using this deep dive as an example again, listening for gist is following the main strategies we're outlining. Listening for specific info might be noting the names of techniques like shadowing or chunking, and listening verbatim would be trying to write down our exact words, Abenzol right now.
Exactly. It sets a much higher bar for listening accuracy and really pushes your skills.
And finally, tying all these listening tips and strategies together, there's an overarching principle the source emphasizes.
Yes, be patient.
The classic advice, but probably the hardest to follow sometimes.
It really is. But the material consistently describes improving listening skills as a marathon, not a sprint. It simply takes time. Your brain needs time to build those new neural pathways, to adapt to processing English sounds at speed, to internalize all these patterns.
And you're definitely going to have days or even weeks where you feel stuck, frustrated, like you're not making any progress at all.
Absolutely. That's a completely normal part of the process. But the source offers reassurance. Those daily minutes you spend listening, even when it feels tough, are making a difference, often below the level of conscious awareness.
And then suddenly, things might just click.
Many learners report exactly that, suddenly having these unlocking moments where speech that previously sounded confusing starts to sound much clearer. It's because the cumulative effect of consistent practice finally reaches a tipping point.
So the key isn't necessarily about being the smartest learner or having some innate talent for languages. It's more about persistence.
Consistency and patience. That's the message. That future version of you, the one who can comfortably watch movies without subtitles or follow fast conversations without stress, will be incredibly grateful for the consistent, patient effort you put in now, even when it felt difficult.
That's a great way to frame it. So the advice is, pick a technique, maybe start small with just 10–15 minutes a day, but do it consistently and trust the process. Those improvements will build up over time.
Exactly. Which leads us nicely into a very specific, structured method the source provides. It's designed to help you actively tackle those challenging fast English clips, a practical 4-step process.
Okay, this sounds like a real toolkit, something you can apply directly to a piece of audio that feels too fast.
It really is. It's designed to shift you from just passively hearing the sounds to actively engaging with the material in a way that systematically builds your comprehension of natural speed.
And the source uses an example conversation clip to illustrate this method.
Yes, a short clip featuring 2 people, David and Chantel. They meet on a beach in Florida. He's a native English speaker. She's a native French speaker from Montreal, so there's an initial language barrier, but they manage to connect. It's a relatable scenario of navigating communication.
Okay, perfect. So what's the first step in this four-step method for cracking fast clips?
Step one is initial exposure. You listen to the original audio clip at its normal, full speed, and critically, with no visual help whatsoever. No subtitles, no transcript, nothing written to look at.
Just pure listening to the fast, natural audio. And the goal here isn't necessarily to understand everything.
Not at all. In fact, you probably won't understand everything, and that's okay. The goal of this first listen is just to get a feel for the conversation. Tune into the rhythm, the overall speed, the intonation patterns. The source calls it the musical quality of the speech. You're basically calibrating your ear to the raw sound and flow.
So don't panic if it sounds confusing. Just absorb the general soundscape.
Exactly. The source makes it clear that feeling like it's too fast or confusing at this stage is completely normal.
Okay, that's step one. Fast, no visuals, just get the feel. What's step two?
Step two is slowing things down. Now, you listen to the exact same audio clip again, but this time you use a playback feature to slow it down, maybe to 0.75x speed, or even 0.5x if it's really challenging.
Ah, using technology to make it more manageable. This must make a big difference to comprehension.
A huge difference. The goal here is to significantly improve your understanding by making the individual words, and especially the connections between words, much clearer. You should be able to understand a lot more now without the intense pressure of the original speed. It really isolates how much the speed itself was hindering your processing.
Okay, so first, fast for the overall feel, then slow for clarity and detailed understanding. What's step three?
Step three is active listening and transcription. Now, you go back and listen to the original fast clip again.
Back to the challenging full speed.
Yes. But this time, your task is to try and write down every single word you hear, or at least as many words as you possibly can catch.
Wow, okay. Transcribing the fast audio, that sounds like serious mental effort.
It is, but it's incredibly effective training for your ear and brain. It forces intense concentration and makes you actively work to decipher the sounds. You have to focus on pronunciation, rhythm, word boundaries, grammar, all without the cognitive load of trying to generate language yourself.
And it must pinpoint exactly where you're struggling, the specific words or phrases or connections that are tripping you up.
Precisely. It's a powerful, active listening practice, even though the output is writing, not speaking. And this leads directly into the crucial final step.
Step four.
Step four is comparison and analysis, or, as the source also calls it, verification.
So checking your work.
Exactly. This is where you take the transcript you just attempted to write and compare it, line by line, with the actual correct transcript of the audio clip.
Ah, the moment of truth.
Kind of, but it's incredibly valuable. You see exactly where you misheard sounds, where you missed words completely, where you didn't recognize vocabulary or couldn't parse the connected speech. It gives you incredibly specific, personalized feedback on your listening weak spots.
And probably highlights pronunciation features you weren't aware of, too.
Definitely. And the source makes an important point. Learners are often pleasantly surprised at this stage by how much they did actually understand correctly, even if it didn't feel like it during the initial fast listen.
That must be really encouraging, seeing tangible proof of what you did get right alongside the areas to work on.
Absolutely. It reinforces progress and provides clear direction for improvement. So this whole four-step process, fast listen, slow listen, transcribe fast, compare, is designed as a systematic workout to actively train your ear and brain for the reality of natural speed English.
It moves you from being a passive recipient of sound to an active decoder.
Precisely.
And the source uses that David and Chantel practice clip, the one about meeting on the beach, to illustrate some specific vocabulary and phrases that come up in these kinds of natural conversations.
They do. They pull out a few examples to show the kind of language you need to be comfortable with. The first one they mention is the phrase, to not matter, which appeared in the clip as didn't matter.
Okay, and that means something wasn't important, it was inconsequential.
Right. The example taken directly from the clip was, it didn't matter that he didn't speak French and she didn't speak English. Their different languages weren't an obstacle to them connecting.
And the source gives another general example. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes, just keep practicing. The mistakes are less important than the practice itself.
Exactly. It's a very common expression. The second phrase highlighted was a phrasal verb, to come down.
Which in a geographical sense means traveling south.
Yes. In the context of the clip, Chantel and her friend had come down from Montreal to Florida. Since Montreal is north of Florida, they traveled south, hence come down.
Makes sense. And the other source example reinforces this. My cousins are coming down from New York for the holidays, implying the speaker is somewhere south of New York.
It's specifically about that southward direction of travel. And the third phrase they pull out is another very common phrasal verb, to end up.
To end up, meaning to arrive at a certain situation or result, often one that wasn't planned or was kind of unexpected.
That's a perfect definition. In the clip, Chantel ended up living with him for 7 months. The implication is that meeting on the beach wasn't part of some grand plan to move in together, but that was the eventual, perhaps surprising outcome of their meeting.
Like the other example. We got lost driving, but we ended up finding a cute little cafe. The cafe wasn't the intended destination, but it's where you found yourself.
Exactly. These examples just reinforce that point. Understanding fast, natural spoken English requires grasping these common phrases, phrasal verbs, and idioms, and understanding how they function in context. It's not just about knowing single words in isolation.
Definitely. And the source also points listeners towards some resources that can help them put these listening strategies, like the four-step method, into practice more systematically.
They do. They mentioned something called a 150-day listening challenge.
Okay, sounds like a structured program. What's the idea behind it?
The concept described is basically 15 minutes of dedicated listening practice every single day for 150 days. The practice involves listening to short, real, authentic English conversations.
Real conversations, not scripted textbook dialogues.
That's what the source highlights. And a key feature mentioned is that it includes over 50 different native speakers.
Oh, wow. So you get exposure to a really wide range of voices, accents, and speaking styles.
Exactly. Great for that ear training aspect we talked about. And the claimed payoff, according to the source, is that by the end of the 150 days, understanding movies, TV shows, and real-life conversations should feel significantly easier.
That's a compelling promise. Did the source mention any details about access or cost?
It did mention pricing a usual price of $500, but there was a limited-time offer mentioned of $199 for lifetime access. However, it also noted that specific offer was set to end on Friday, March 21st.
Okay, so that particular discount might well have expired by the time people hear this.
Very likely. But the core concept behind the resource point, the value of structured, consistent, daily listening practice using authentic materials with varied speakers, that idea is still incredibly relevant, regardless of that specific offer.
Absolutely. Consistency is the key takeaway there. And the source also offered something free, right? A PDF worksheet.
Yes, a free downloadable PDF worksheet.
Tell us about that. What's in it?
It sounds really practical. It's designed specifically to help you get started with that four-step method we just went through. It apparently includes detailed instructions on how to perform each of the 4 steps,
Okay.
a practice worksheet you can use right away, and the full transcript of that David and Chantel conversation example. So basically, everything you need to try out the method yourself immediately.
That sounds incredibly useful. A complete starter kit for implementing that technique. How do listeners get it?
The source says you just need to click a link, presumably in the show notes or description, enter your name and email, and you can download it.
Simple enough. And there's a bonus mentioned too.
Yes, signing up for that free worksheet also apparently gets you weekly free PDF worksheets delivered to your email, offering more ongoing tips, exercises, and practice materials.
Oh, that's great. So it's not just a one-off download, but ongoing support.
Seems like it. So whether you consider a structured program or just start with that free worksheet and apply the 4-step method using your own audio sources, the crucial element, as always, is putting these techniques into consistent, regular practice.
Definitely. Knowledge is one thing, but practice is where the real learning and improvement happen.
Practice is where the rubber meets the road, absolutely.
Okay, so we've really dug deep into the listening comprehension side, understanding that fast English. But there's the other side of the coin, isn't there? A challenge many listeners face.
Ah, yes. You understand what people are saying reasonably well.
Yeah, the input processing is okay.
But then when it's your turn to speak, especially in a faster-paced conversation, you just freeze up or feel like there's this frustrating delay before you can get your words out.
Exactly, that lag time. Your brain understands, but formulating and producing your own response quickly feels like wading through treacle sometimes, and the conversation moves on.
It's incredibly common and can really knock your confidence when you're trying to participate actively.
So how do we tackle that side of things? How can you improve your own speaking fluency and speed so you can respond more quickly and confidently?
Well, the good news is the source material addresses this directly too. It offers a really practical 3-step strategy specifically aimed at improving speaking fluency and reducing that response delay.
Okay.
These techniques, which the source mentions, are drawn from a resource called Mastering Fast English Conversations, aren't about memorizing more grammar rules. They're active practice methods designed to train your brain and mouth to work together more quickly and smoothly. And they can apparently show results fairly quickly with consistent practice.
So practical exercises focus directly on getting the words out faster and more naturally. I like the sound of that.
Me too. It's about building that production skill.
And the source mentioned another free PDF worksheet specifically for these speaking techniques as well, right?
Yes, just like for the listening method, there's a companion worksheet that covers these 3 speaking steps, offering extra practice. We can mention that again later.
Perfect. Okay, let's get into these 3 steps for building speaking fluency and speed. What's the first one?
Step 1 is a technique called shadowing.
Shadowing. Okay, we heard that term mentioned briefly before in relation to listening, but explain it as a speaking practice.
Right. As a speaking technique, shadowing means listening to a native speaker's audio and trying your best to repeat exactly what they say almost simultaneously, or just a fraction of a second behind them.
Like you're their vocal echo, or, well, their shadow.
Exactly like that. You're not just repeating after a long pause. You're trying to speak along with them or immediately after them.
And you're aiming to match everything. Their speed, their rhythm, their pauses, their intonation.
Yes, precisely. The source explains that shadowing is incredibly effective for improving your pronunciation because you're mimicking a native model directly. But crucially for fluency, it also helps you absorb and internalize the natural rhythm, intonation patterns, and overall flow of spoken English.
It's like you're copying the music of the language, not just the individual notes or words.
That's a great analogy. And here's the fascinating part the source highlights. Because you're focusing only on copying the sounds and rhythm, your brain kind of bypasses the usual cognitive load of having to think about what to say, the grammar, the vocabulary choice.
So it frees up mental resources.
Exactly. It allows your mouth and your ears to train together purely on the mechanics of producing speech, quickly and naturally. You're internalizing the how of speaking fluently.
That makes a lot of sense. Should we try a quick example? Maybe I can shadow you.
Sure, let's do it. I'll say a sentence and you try to repeat it right after me, matching my speed and flow as closely as possible. Ready? Let's meet at the coffee shop around 3 p.m.
Mimics immediately. Let's meet at the coffee shop around 3 p.m.
Okay, yeah. You really have to focus and push yourself to keep up. It forces quick processing and production.
It absolutely does. It gives your verbal reaction speed a direct workout. That's shadowing.
Okay, powerful technique. What's the second step in the strategy for speaking fluency?
Step 2 is chunking. Chunking, like breaking things down into smaller pieces. We talked about this for listening, recognizing word groups.
Yes, and now we're applying it to speaking. It's about actively thinking about and practicing sentences, not as a long string of individual words, but as groups of words, natural phrases, or language blocks that native speakers often use together as a single unit.
So like those collocations and common phrases again, but focusing on being able to produce them smoothly as chunks.
Exactly. Instead of mentally translating word by word by word, which makes speech sound slow and hesitant.
Yeah, that's a dead giveaway.
Chunking helps you produce language in more natural-sounding bursts, much more like a native speaker. It dramatically improves the smoothness and rhythm of your delivery.
Can we try an example of practicing chunks? Maybe take a sentence from the source.
Definitely. Here's a slightly longer sentence. Even though the weather was terrible yesterday, we still decided to go for a picnic.
Okay, saying that all in one goes smoothly might be tricky if you're thinking word by word. How would you chunk it?
You'd break it into natural thought groups. For instance, the first chunk could be, even though the weather was terrible yesterday. Try repeating that chunk.
Even though the weather was terrible yesterday.
Good. And the second chunk. We still decided to go for a picnic? Repeat that.
We still decided to go for a picnic.
See how practicing those two natural phrases separately makes the whole sentence feel much more manageable and flow better when you put them together.
Yeah, it definitely does. It feels less daunting.
Can we do one more?
Sure. Another example from the source. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me at the end.
Okay, how would we chunk that one? Maybe.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.
Perfect first chunk. Repeat that.
If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.
And second chunk, me at the end.
Exactly. Repeat that.
Practicing these common grammatical and lexical chunks really helps train your brain and your mouth to produce them more automatically as units.
It builds fluency by reducing the number of decisions your brain has to make per sentence. You're retrieving familiar blocks, not single words.
Okay, so shattering for rhythm, pronunciation, and flow. Chunking for smoother, more natural phrasing. What's the third step for boosting speaking speed and confidence?
Step 3 is response drills.
Drills, like practicing quick answers over and over.
Yes, exactly that. This technique directly targets that hesitation, that delay you feel when someone asks you a question or you need to respond quickly in a conversation.
The goal is to cut down on those awkward pauses and just get faster at responding.
Precisely. It's about building automaticity for common conversational exchanges. Think of it like a musician practicing scales or chords. They do it repeatedly so they don't have to think about the fingerings during a performance. It becomes muscle memory.
So response drills build conversational muscle memory.
That's a great way to put it. You're training your brain to access and produce common responses quickly and naturally without getting bogged down in overthinking the grammar or searching for vocabulary in the moment.
Okay, let's try a couple of quick drills. Maybe you ask me a common question from the source.
All right. Answer aloud as quickly and naturally as you can. First one. How are you?
Response instantly, good, thanks, how about you? Yeah, okay, that's pretty automatic for most learners.
It is. Your brain is wired for that standard social exchange. Let's try another common one. What did you do this past weekend?
Response quickly. Not much, just relaxed at home mostly. You. See, even adding the and mostly feels natural there. Practicing helps that come out smoothly.
Exactly. By repeatedly practicing answering common questions like these out loud, you condition your brain to fire off appropriate responses much faster and more naturally when you're in a real conversation. It significantly reduces that freezing feeling.
It definitely builds confidence knowing you have some automatic responses ready to go.
It does. So just to quickly recap those 3 speaking strategies from the source. Step 1, shadowing, to improve pronunciation, rhythm, and flow by mimicking native speakers.
Step 2, chunking, to practice producing language in natural phrase blocks for smoother delivery.
And step 3, response drills, to build speed, automaticity, and confidence for common conversational turns.
And just like with the listening tips, the source emphasizes that consistent practice is absolutely vital for these speaking techniques too, right? Even just a few minutes each day.
Absolutely. Consistency is the magic ingredient. Doing these drills regularly makes a much bigger difference than one long session once a month.
And remind us about that free PDF worksheet again.
Yes, the source mentioned there's a specific free PDF worksheet available that covers these 3 speaking steps: shadowing, chunking, and response drills with extra practice exercises. A great way to get started applying them.
Fantastic. Okay, so those are techniques for the mechanics of speaking more fluently and quickly. But the source also talks about broader elements, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Things that contribute to sounding more natural overall, more native-like, beyond just speed.
Yes, absolutely. Moving beyond just fluency, they introduce 3 key elements that really add that layer of polish and naturalness to your spoken English.
It's the first one.
The first is intonation.
The music of the language again. The rise and fall of your voice as you speak.
Exactly. And it's incredibly important because intonation carries so much meaning and emotion. It's how we signal whether we're asking a question or making a statement. It shows emphasis, it conveys attitude, it adds energy and life to our speech.
Right. The source gave that perfect example. Saying the words, I'm ready. If you say it with a falling tone, I'm ready, it's a statement. But if you say it with a rising tone, I'm ready, it becomes a question, even though the words are identical.
It completely changes the meaning and function.
Yeah.
So, paying attention to intonation is crucial for being understood correctly and for sounding natural. The source recommends actively listening for intonation patterns in native speakers and consciously trying to copy them in your own speech.
Okay, intonation is key. What's the second element for sounding more natural?
The second one is linking.
Connecting sounds between words. This ties directly back to the connected speech concept that was a hurdle for listening comprehension.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And that's why understanding it and practicing it is so vital for both skills. Linking is a major reason native speakers sound smooth and fast. It's not just that individual words are spoken quickly, it's that the words flow together seamlessly without awkward breaks.
Like the examples we heard before, what are you doing? Often sounding like, what you doing?
Exactly. Or, I don't know, blending smoothly into, I don't know. Those connections are fundamental to natural spoken rhythm.
So for speaking, you need to become aware of these common linking patterns and actually practice doing them yourself.
Yes. The source suggests consciously listening for linking, noticing where sounds connect or blend, and then trying to incorporate those connections into your own speech. It might feel a bit strange or forced at first,
I can imagine.
but consistent practice helps it become much more automatic and natural over time. It makes your speech significantly smoother.
Okay, so intonation for melody and meaning, linking for smooth connections. What's the third key element for sounding more natural?
The third one is using natural expression.
This sounds like it circles back to the vocabulary point we started with, using everyday language.
It does, but with a focus on producing it. It's about actively using those common everyday phrases, idioms, phrasal verbs, and collocations that native speakers use all the time. It's about speaking English the way it's actually spoken, not just relying on literal translations from your own language or using grammatically perfect but slightly stiff or unnatural phrasing.
Like choosing to say, it's up to you, instead of maybe a more literal, the decision belongs to you.
Exactly. Or using common responses like, no worries, instead of perhaps a more formal, it is quite all right, or do not concern yourself.
These are the phrases that pepper everyday conversation.
They really are. And the best way to get comfortable using them, according to the source, immersion. Listen a lot to various types of native speech conversations, interviews, shows, jot down useful phrases you hear repeatedly, and then this is the crucial part. Take the leap and actually try using them yourself in conversation.
Even if you feel a bit hesitant or worry about making a mistake.
Especially then. That's how these expressions move from your passive knowledge to your active natural vocabulary. You have to practice producing them for them to stick and feel authentic.
Okay, so those three keys work together. Intonation provides the melody, linking connects the sound smoothly, and natural expressions provide the authentic vocabulary and phrasing. It's the combination that creates that native-like flow.
Precisely. They all contribute to sounding more natural and less like you're reading from a script or translating in your head.
The source prompts you to reflect, doesn't it? Like, are you actively paying attention to these elements in your own speech? Maybe record yourself speaking.
Yeah, recording yourself and listening back can be incredibly eye-opening. You might notice things about your intonation, linking, or lack thereof, and phrasing that you weren't aware of while speaking. Conscious awareness is the first step towards improvement.
And conscious practice is the next. Makes sense. Now, the source also offered something like a cheat sheet, right? 3 more specific, maybe smaller techniques to add even more polish.
Yes, exactly. Think of these as finer details that further enhance fluency and naturalness. And the source mentions these are also covered in that free PDF worksheet for extra practice.
Good to know. What's the first technique on this cheat sheet?
Technique 1 is using contractions.
Okay, like don't instead of do not, it's instead of it is I'm, you're, he'll, we've.
All of those. Native speakers use contractions constantly in spoken English. Why? The source explains it's not just laziness. It makes speech flow much better, it's more efficient, and it contributes significantly to the natural rhythm. Avoiding them can make you sound overly formal or even robotic.
So deliberately practicing using contractions is important.
Yes. The source suggests taking sentences that are grammatically correct but sound a bit stiff without contractions and practicing saying the natural contracted version.
Like turning I am going to the store into the much more common I'm going to the store.
Or he will be there soon. Naturally becomes he'll be there soon. Practicing these helps your speech sound less stilted and more integrated.
Okay, contractions are key. What's the second technique on the cheat sheet?
Technique 2 is paying attention to stress patterns.
Stress patterns, meaning where you put the emphasis within words and sentences.
Exactly. English is a stress-timed language, which means the rhythm is based on stress syllables occurring at roughly regular intervals. Placing stress correctly on syllables within words, like photograph versus photographer, and stressing the important words within a sentence is crucial for clarity and natural rhythm.
So it's not just what words you say, but which syllables or words you give more prominence to. That signals importance and creates the beat of the language.
Precisely. It helps convey meaning and makes your speech much easier for listeners to follow. The source suggests listening carefully to which words native speakers emphasize in sentences and trying to mimic those stress patterns.
Okay. Contraction, stress patterns. What's the third technique on the cheat sheet?
Technique 3 is using fillers appropriately.
Fillers? You mean like a, like, well, so, right. Aren't those things we're usually told to avoid, like signs of hesitation or uncertainty?
That's often the traditional advice, but the source makes a really interesting counterpoint here. It argues that fillers, used naturally and not excessively, actually play a pretty essential role in making conversations sound authentic.
Really? How so?
They serve several functions. They can bridge thoughts while you formulate your next idea. They buy you a split second of thinking time without leaving an awkward silence. And they can make your speech sound less abrupt or scripted, more spontaneous and conversational. Native speakers use them constantly, often completely subconsciously.
So trying to eliminate them completely might actually make you sound less natural, kind of robotic.
That's the argument. Of course, you don't want to overuse them to the point where every other word is like or as that becomes distracting. But the source suggests becoming aware of how native speakers use fillers naturally and then trying to incorporate them appropriately into your own speech. Don't be afraid of a natural or well.
That's a relief, actually. So, contractions for flow, stress patterns for rhythm and emphasis, and fillers for natural pausing and conversational feel. These add those subtle nuances.
They really do. And the source connects these back to related concepts we've already discussed, like connected speech, blending words smoothly, and reductions, shortened forms like gonna, wanna, hafta. It also re-emphasizes the role of intonation. All these elements work together synergistically to create fluent, natural-sounding English.
It's like building layers of naturalness onto your speaking.
Exactly. It's a holistic process.
Okay, this has been incredibly comprehensive on both listening and speaking. Let's just circle back one more time to where we started this deep dive. That core problem of understanding fast English conversations and feeling overwhelmed.
Right, that feeling of the speech just washing over you, too fast to catch. The source brings the focus back again, reinforcing 3 key strategies specifically designed to help you master the comprehension of fast English. Think of these as active ways to take control of your listening practice.
Okay, what's the first strategy here?
Strategy 1 is prediction.
We touched on this briefly, using context to anticipate what might be coming next.
Exactly. Using the context of the conversation, your background knowledge of the world, and your knowledge of English language patterns to make educated guesses about upcoming words or ideas.
How does this specifically help with fast speech comprehension?
It helps your brain process information more efficiently. Instead of passively waiting for every single sound and then trying to decode it, you're actively building a mental framework. You're priming your brain for likely possibilities, which makes it easier to recognize words and ideas when they arrive quickly.
Like those examples, hearing, "It's raining cats and dogs, don't forget your road," instantly makes you anticipate umbrella or raincoat.
Precisely. Or, if you're feeling tired, you should probably get some. Leads you to expect rest or sleep. Your brain is already halfway there, making it easier to keep up with the speed.
And remembering the caution. It's flexible anticipation, not rigid guessing. You still have to listen carefully and adjust if your prediction was wrong.
Absolutely. It requires mental flexibility. It's a dynamic process of anticipating, listening, and confirming or correcting. But it's a powerful tool against feeling overwhelmed by speed.
Okay, prediction is strategy 1. What's the second key strategy for mastering fast listening?
Strategy 2 is shadowing.
Wait, shadowing again. We just discussed that in detail as a technique for improving speaking fluency. How does it help with listening comprehension?
This is a really interesting point the source makes. The act of shadowing, trying to mimic fast native speech in real time, actually boosts your auditory processing speed.
How?
By forcing your brain and your speech organs to work together at that faster pace, you are simultaneously training your ear to recognize those fast sounds, connections, and rhythms more quickly. It helps sync up your hearing and understanding, effectively shrinking the lag time between hearing fast speech and comprehending its meaning.
So the very act of trying to produce the fast speech patterns makes you better at perceiving them.
Exactly. It's an intense workout that benefits both your speaking production and your listening perception when it comes to speed. Let's try a quick shadowing exercise focused on listening speed. Try to shadow me immediately on these faster sentences. So I'll send you a quick message as soon as I get there.
I'll send you a quick message as soon as I get there.
We need to wrap this up pretty quickly.
We need to wrap this up pretty quickly.
Wow, yeah, you can feel how it forces your brain to process the incoming sound incredibly rapidly to keep up.
It directly trains that rapid auditory processing needed for fast speech.
Okay, prediction and shadowing. What's the third key strategy for fast listening mastery?
Strategy 3 is ear training.
Which means deliberately exposing yourself to variety.
Yes. Specifically, exposing yourself to diverse accents and styles of spoken English.
Because, as we discussed, English isn't monolithic. Native speakers from Australia sound different from those from Scotland, who sound different from those in Texas, and so on. And non-native speakers have countless variations too. Precisely. Your ears need training to become flexible and adaptable to this variety. If you only ever listen to one type of accent, you'll likely struggle when you encounter something different.
So how do you actively train your ear like this?
You consciously seek out diverse audio sources. Watch movies or TV shows featuring actors from different English-speaking regions. Listen to podcasts hosted by people with various accents. Find interviews or talks given by people from different countries. Make variety a deliberate part of your listening diet.
And the source had a tip for making this less daunting initially.
Yes. When you first encounter a particularly challenging accent or very fast speech, aim for just comprehension first. Don't pressure yourself to understand every single word right away. Just try to get the main idea. Patience and consistent exposure are key. Your ear will gradually adapt.
And they mentioned using playback speed controls again here.
They did. That practical tip of using the 0.75x or 2.5x speed setting can be incredibly helpful as training wheels when dealing with difficult accents or speeds. Listen slowed down first to get accustomed to the patterns, then gradually increase the speed back to normal as you feel more comfortable.
So, prediction to anticipate, shadowing to sync hearing and understanding at speed, and ear training to adapt to variety. These three strategies seem like a powerful combination for taking control of fast listening challenges.
They really are. And again, the source underscores that these aren't passive concepts. They require active engagement and consistent practice to yield real results. You have to consciously apply them.
Let's try to synthesize the most actionable takeaways from across this whole deep dive, pulling together the threads for someone ready to start practicing today.
A good consolidation is always helpful. The source strongly, repeatedly reinforces the importance of active listening, particularly training yourself to focus on the main idea first.
Just asking yourself that simple question after listening, what was the main point here?
Yes, it's a powerful mental habit to cut through the clutter of details and prevent that feeling of being totally overwhelmed. Just grasp the core message first.
They also reiterate the importance of recognizing speech reductions and connections.
Understanding that those shortcuts native speakers use, like give me a second, let me know,
Yeah.
or sounds blending like in get up for get up, aren't random. They follow predictable patterns. Learning the common ones is like learning essential shorthand for faster comprehension.
You start hearing those patterns, not just confusing sounds.
Exactly. You begin to decode the stream more efficiently. And finally, the source really emphasizes the power of practicing with real-world content using a structured process. They specifically outlined a three-step approach for this kind of active practice.
Right, let's recap that three-step practice cycle. Step 1.
Step 1. Listen to your chosen authentic audio clip, a podcast segment, a scene from a show, the first time, with no visual aids. Just listen to get the feel, notice the speed, the rhythm, maybe some reductions, but don't stress about catching every word.
Okay, initial feel. Step 2.
Step 2. Listen again, but this time with the subtitles or a transcript available. Use the text to connect the sounds you heard to the written words. This is where you clarify things you missed or misunderstood, and you can explicitly see how connected speech and reductions look when written out.
Connecting sound to text. And step 3.
Step 3. Go back to the audio, maybe focus on shorter segments now, and repeat parts out loud, actively mimicking the speaker. This engages your pronunciation muscles, helps you copy the flow and intonation, and really internalizes the natural rhythms of the speech.
Listening, verifying with text, then actively mimicking. That seems like a really solid cycle for deep engagement.
It really is. It takes you from passive hearing to active analysis and production, hitting the key skills needed for improvement.
And it's crucial to remember, as the source stresses throughout, these aren't just tips to know about intellectually. They require conscious effort, deliberate practice, and consistency to actually make a difference in your skills.
Absolutely. Consistency really is the golden thread weaving through all the advice in this source material. Even those short bursts of daily practice, applied consistently, will compound into significant improvements over time.
Well, we have certainly covered a tremendous amount of ground in this deep dive, drawing entirely from the source material you brought us on understanding and speaking fast English.
We really have. We've dissected the core challenges, the specific vocabulary needed for spoken English, the limits of processing speed, and the complexities of connected speech.
We also broadened the lens, putting it in the context of English as a global lingua franca, reminding us that interaction often happens with other non-native speakers.
And then we dove headfirst into practical strategies for listening, the absolute necessity of constant exposure, the wisdom of picking a reference accent initially, the power of immersive listening periods, the importance of varying your media and topics, and the different levels of practice listening for just specific info or verbatim accuracy.
We walk through that very practical four-step method for actively tackling fast audio clips. Initial exposure, slowing down, active transcription, and comparison analysis.
Highlighting useful vocabulary from the practice clip along the way.
Then we shifted focus to the other side, improving speaking fluency and speed. We introduced that three-step strategy, shadowing for rhythm and pronunciation,
Chunking for smoother, more natural phrasing.
and response drills for building speed and automaticity in conversation.
We also discussed those key elements that contribute to sounding more natural overall. Getting the intonation right, mastering linking between words.
And actively using natural expressions, the everyday vocabulary of spoken English.
Plus, we added those finishing touches from the cheat sheet. Consciously using contractions, paying attention to stress patterns, and understanding the natural role of fillers.
And finally, we circled back to reinforce those core actionable techniques, specifically for mastering fast listening. The power of prediction, the dual benefit of shadowing for listening speed, and the necessity of deliberate ear training for variety, alongside always focusing on the main idea and recognizing reductions.
It's a really rich and comprehensive set of insights and actionable strategies, all flowing directly from the source material provided.
And throughout it all, that recurring theme, like you said, the marathon, not the sprint, the absolute importance of patience and consistency in this language learning journey.
It really can't be overstated. Improvement takes time and persistent effort.
So the final piece of advice from the source seems to be, don't feel overwhelmed by all these techniques. You don't have to implement everything perfectly starting tomorrow.
Exactly. The encouragement is to just pick one thing, one technique or one strategy that resonated with you today. Maybe it's a four-step listening method. Maybe it's practicing chunking for 10 minutes a day. Maybe it's just committing to listening to an English podcast during your commute.
Just choose one starting point and commit to practicing it consistently this week.
Yes, because even those small, consistent actions compounded over time are what lead to those breakthroughs. And don't forget that free PDF worksheet we mentioned several times that's designed to be a fantastic starting point, giving you immediate resources for the four-step listening method and the three speaking techniques.
Absolutely. A really valuable tool offered in the source to help you put these ideas into action right away.
Definitely worth checking out if you want that guided start.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, here's a final thought for you, the listener, to ponder, building on everything we've explored from the source material today.
Okay.
Consider how this whole process, we've discussed this focused, analytical, practice-based approach to tackling the complex challenge of understanding and producing faster, more natural English. How might that approach apply to other communication hurdles or even other complex challenges you face in different areas of your life?
That's interesting. Taking the same mindset beyond language learning.
Yeah. Could you take this same methodology, breaking down a complex problem into smaller components, practicing those components systematically, building awareness of underlying patterns, being patient with the process, using tools like prediction or analysis, and apply it effectively to other fast-moving streams of information or interaction that you need to navigate?
Whether that's learning intricate new software at work, mastering a complex physical skill, or even understanding and responding more effectively in, say, challenging negotiations or fast-paced team meetings.
Exactly. Could dissecting the challenge, practicing specific skills in manageable chunks, anticipating patterns, and reflecting on your performance lead to similar breakthroughs in those areas, just like it can with mastering fast English?
It's a fascinating question about the transferability of learning strategies, something to definitely mull over.
Well, thank you for bringing us this rich source material and walking us through it today. It's been a really insightful deep dive.
My pleasure. It's crucial information for so many learners. Thanks for facilitating the discussion.
And thank you, our listener, for joining us. We really appreciate you being here and diving deep with us.
Yes, thank you for listening. Until the next deep dive, keep practicing, keep listening, keep speaking, and keep exploring.
We'll talk to you soon.